Back when Carolus Linnaeus and Isaac Newton were making their great discoveries, people like them were known as natural philosophers. Today, they would be called scientists. Philosophers are people who seek wisdom or knowledge. During the Enlightenment, while natural philosophers sought to understand natural things, such as the motion of the planets or the behavior of microscopic organisms, other philosophers concentrated on the mind, political subjects, and other more abstract concepts as well. One of the most important philosophers to focus on political subjects was an Englishman named John Locke, who lived from 1632 to 1704. Locke believed that the power of a government to rule must come from the consent of the governed. In other words, that people should be able to choose who governs them. Locke took comfort in England's glorious revolution of 1688, in which the king was forced to relinquish a large amount of his power to parliamentary representatives. He promoted the idea that every human being was born with three basic natural rights: those of life, political equality or liberty, and the ownership of property. Locke also promoted freedom of the press, educational reform, and religious tolerance, and called for the overthrow of governments that failed to protect basic human rights. In France, several great Enlightenment philosophers wrote passionately about human rights and democracy as well. French philosopher Voltaire, for example, championed the idea of freedom of speech with his famous statement, "I disapprove of what you say, but will defend to the death your right to say it." While another Frenchman, Montesquieu, called for a complete separation of powers to maintain balance in government, which was to be accomplished by creating separate legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government. Nearly all philosophers of the Enlightenment era wanted to see a strict separation of church and state as well, for they realized that mixing government and religion was almost always a recipe for disaster. The Enlightenment philosophers themselves were usually deists, people without traditional religious beliefs, who believed